In 2007, the government of Estonia was taken almost entirely offline. Banks, newspapers, parliament, emergency services, all knocked out by coordinated distributed denial of service attacks. The perpetrators were never formally proven, but intelligence assessments pointed to Russia following a political dispute over a Soviet war memorial. It lasted 3 weeks. It was the first cyber attack treated as a potential act of war against a NATO member. That incident is where part 2 begins, not with a criminal, with a state. Because the 2000s were when governments realized that the internet was a battlefield, and they'd already been fighting on it without declaring it. Stuxnet was discovered in 2010. It was a cyber weapon designed by the United States and Israel to destroy Iranian nuclear centrifuges. The code was extraordinary. 4 zero-day exploits used simultaneously. Digital signatures forged from legitimate certificates. The ability to replicate across air-gapped networks through USB drives. Its specific target, Siemens programmable logic controllers running centrifuges at Iran's Natanz facility. It caused the centrifuges to spin at damaging speeds while reporting normal operation to the monitoring software. Iran's technicians watched equipment fail without understanding why. Stuxnet destroyed roughly 1/5 of Iran's nuclear centrifuges. It was the first known cyber weapon designed to cause physical destruction. The 2013 target breach established the supply chain attack as a primary threat vector years before SolarWinds. Attackers compromised Fazio Mechanical Services, Target's HVAC contractor, to steal credentials that accessed Target's vendor portal. From there, they moved laterally to Target's payment processing network and installed malware on point-of-sale terminals. 40 million credit and debit card numbers were stolen. An additional 70 million customer records were exfiltrated. The breach cost Target $200 million in settlements and triggered the resignation of both the CEO and CIO. The lesson: your attack surface includes your vendors. Wasn't absorbed industry-wide until SolarWinds made it undeniable 7 years later. 2014 was the year data breaches reached industrial scale. eBay disclosed a breach of 145 million user records, names, addresses, dates of birth, encrypted passwords. Home Depot's breach affected 56 million payment cards. JP Morgan Chase lost data on 76 million households and 7 million small businesses. Then Sony Pictures was hit, attributed to North Korea's Lazarus Group in retaliation for the film The Interview. The attackers wiped Sony's systems, leaked years of sensitive internal emails, unreleased films, and employee personal data, and threatened physical violence against theaters showing the film. It was destructive, embarrassing, and geopolitically unprecedented. A nation-state attacked a film studio over a comedy. The Shadow Brokers changed the landscape in 2016 by leaking NSA offensive hacking tools. The group, never definitively attributed, though U.S. intelligence assessed Russian involvement, published exploits developed by the NSA's Tailored Access Operations Unit. The most consequential was Eternal Blue, an SMB exploit targeting Windows systems. Eternal Blue was subsequently weaponized into WannaCry by North Korea and NotPetya by Russia. WannaCry infected over 200,000 systems across 150 countries. NotPetya caused $10 billion in damage globally, the most destructive cyber attack in history. Both ran on tools built by the NSA. The lesson about government vulnerability stockpiling was the most contested in cybersecurity policy for years. Ransomware went from a nuisance to an industry between 2016 and 2020. The economics were made possible by cryptocurrency. Bitcoin provided a payment mechanism that was harder to trace and impossible to reverse. CryptoLocker in 2013 was the prototype. WannaCry in 2017 proved scale was possible. Then came the ransomware as a service model. Developers built the ransomware and leased it to affiliates who conducted the attacks, splitting the ransom proceeds. Revel, Lockbit, Conti, DarkSide, each ran like a business. H are processes for affiliates, customer service portals for victims, payment negotiation teams. The Colonial Pipeline attack in 2021, attributed to DarkSide, shut down 45% of the U.S. East Coast's fuel supply. The Equifax breach of 2017 remains the most consequential consumer data breach in U.S. history. The Social Security numbers, birth dates, addresses, and driver's license numbers of 147 million Americans, nearly half the U.S. population, were exfiltrated. The root cause was a failure to patch Apache struts, despite a patch being available and a CISA alert having been issued 2 months before the breach. Equifax's CISO resigned. The company paid $700 million in settlements. The identities of 147 million people remain permanently compromised. This data doesn't expire. It has been used in identity fraud and synthetic identity schemes continuously since 2017. China's APT-10 operated a campaign called Cloud Hopper from approximately 2014 to 2017, targeting managed service providers, the companies that run IT infrastructure for other businesses. By compromising the MSP, APT-10 gained access to the MSP's clients across aviation, satellite, pharmaceutical, government defense, and financial sectors. The indictment of 2 APT-10 members by the U.S. Department of Justice in 2018 named victims in at least 45 countries. The scale of industrial espionage, not just stealing data, but systematically looting intellectual property across global supply chains, represented a different category of threat than anything seen before. The 2020s arrived with SolarWinds, which part 1 of this series already covered. But alongside SolarWinds, the decade opened with an unprecedented volume of MOVEit, Log4Shell, and Exchange Server vulnerabilities being weaponized at scale within days of public disclosure. The window between vulnerability publication and mass exploitation collapsed from weeks to hours. The ransomware ecosystem industrialized further. Nation-state and criminal groups began sharing tooling and infrastructure. The threat landscape became simultaneously more sophisticated and more accessible. Sophisticated at the top end, accessible to low-skill actors who rented ransomware as a service toolkits and fired mass campaigns with no technical knowledge required. The 20 years from 2000 to 2020 produced something the early hackers couldn't have anticipated: a global industry of cybercrime generating billions annually, parallel nation-state programs, conducting espionage and sabotage at scale, and the defensive industry scrambling to respond to a threat landscape that changes faster than organizations can adapt. The history is not academic. Every technique used in those 20 years is still in active use today. The tools evolved. The principles didn't. If you want to understand the ransomware ecosystem that defined this era, the specific group that became so large it was effectively a corporation before its infrastructure was seized, our video on Lockbit covers that story from the inside.